Hello, this is Joshua. Welcome to the video. I made a video about how you can deploy a Laravel application to Vercel, and I said I was going to do a follow-up. And well, this is the video. And if you haven't seen the previous one, you should go see it, because in this video we're going to take it a step further, adding the database and some client asset build. The first thing I'm going to do is to set up a new Laravel project. So I'm just going to bring up my terminal and the same command, Laravel new, and I'm calling the project Laravel Vercel DB. You can call it anything you want. And this time I do want a React starter project. So on the React project with the built-in authentication, I can use PHP unit, and I'm just going to let that to set up. Now it's asking if I need to install dependencies, and I'm just going to say yes. Okay, it's done now, and I'm just going to open my code here in VS Code. Now I have my project open. Notice this is not just a Laravel application, but it does have React frontend built. So if you go to the resources, JS, you'll see that there are lots of React components, and we're going to be deploying this together with our Laravel application. The first thing I want to do is to push this to my repository, and then we'll go on in configuring this for Vercel. Now to configure this, I just need to create my Vercel.json file and put in the previous configuration that we did last time. We'd also want to create lambda, the API slash lambda.php, and put the entire content of the index.php file in there. Add a vercel.ignore file and ignore the public index.php file. And from here, we are going to keep on configuring the project. Now, this was what we did in the previous video. Again, go see the video. And yeah, it was good. But for now, we have some dependencies, okay, that needs to be installed for the React package, React front end. And we just need to configure Vercel to properly handle that. So I'm going to jump right into my Vercel.json. And the first thing I want to do is I want to disable building. Now, the reason for that is our Laravel setup, or that's for the front end, uses some packages in the vendor directory, and those packages won't be ready at the time Vercel tries to build, and that will cause our deployments to fail. So to avoid that, I'm just going to let Vercel know that it shouldn't deploy. So just going to say our build command should be, well, it can be nothing, but I'm just saying echo skip to let you know that we're skipping. So if we are preventing skipping here, how do we actually build? Well, it turns out that the Vercel PHP runtime would execute a Vercel script in our composer JSON when it is setting up. So what we'll do now is to go to composer JSON, and in the script section, we want to add a new script called Vercel. And in here, we're going to write commands that we want to run after this is, or at the time when our Vercel function is being set up. And it is in here, we want to run npm run build to build the static assets. However, there's a downside to doing this. So because we're doing it this way, Vercel doesn't know that this asset should be included in the static build, but we will have to do that manually, and we can do that manually. The way to do that is just to have, well, command similar to this. We're just going to say, well, want to ensure that the static directory exists. It should, but just to be sure, so your build doesn't fail. And then we want to copy every single build, the output of the build here, and put that into the static directory. So that way, when Vercel is wrapping up, it will ensure that the static builds are available. Now, remember that the reason we are doing this whole change is so that we can work with the database. And one thing with Laravel is we have migrations. So we would also want to, our migration should run at this point, because at this point, we know that our Laravel application is set up. So if there's any migration change, it should be run at this point. So I'm just going to add that in here. So we're going to say PHP artisan migrate. We're using a false because our application will likely be in production. So we're just letting them know that, hey, it's okay to run the migrations. Now with this setup, we should be good to deploy this to Vercel. However, there is actually something I came across, and we have to fix that so that you don't have that same issue. Because Laravel is running behind Vercel, it doesn't get to see that your app is running on HTTPS. So it tries to serve some of the URLs, maybe redirects with HTTP. And because that's like a miscontent, it sometimes causes an error. And you really don't want that. So what we want to do is to let Laravel know that the request coming to it actually coming through a proxy, and it can trust the proxy. So if the proxy tells you that, hey, this is a HTTPS request, even if you don't, Laravel doesn't see it from the request itself, you should trust that, okay, the proxy is telling the truth, and you should treat it as a HTTPS request. The way we can do that in Laravel, and this is the latest version of Laravel, the Laravel 12, is to go into the Bootstrap and app file, and in here we want to configure and trust our proxies. And to do that, we can just do that with this line of code. This lets Laravel know that, hey, trust our proxies. Now, this is fine because our app is running inside of Vercel as a function. So the only proxy it will get is Vercel basically. And then you should trust all these headers, especially this one, right? If the protocol is HTTPS, you should trust what the proxy is telling it the protocol is. I just need to import this request class. And at the top here, I'm just going to add that import. For older versions of Laravel, you wouldn't see this because it's kind of like a new syntax. Rather, what you would see is in the app, I think HTTP folder in the middleware, you should see a trusts proxies class. I think this is where it should be. It will look something like this. What you just want to do is to update the class and add the proxies property and then the headers property to, well, similar values to what we have here. And that's for older versions of Laravel. But for this version, we're fine with what we have. All right, we are almost done configuring this for Laravel. I'm just going to push this now and set up a new Vercel application, and then we'll go on from there. I'm here in the Vercel and I have already selected my repository to be deployed here, and we're just going to go ahead to configuring this project. We are going to get all the previous environment variables we had. We're just going to add that in there. I'm still going to change this, okay? And then we're good. However, since we have a database now, what we want to do is to also add the database credentials. So I'm going to add more and then define my environment variables for the database connection. Now, don't worry about this. I'm using the service called DB for free. It just gives you temporary databases that you can use. I mean, just for testing, but you can use your live database. But you do need an open database because Vercel needs a direct connection to your database. But you could use even MongoDB service or Postgres or some service that gives you database access. So I'm just going to change the app URL now. So since I know the format Vercel gives this application, so it's just going to be HTTPS, then the name of my project, which is Laravel Vercel DB and db.vercel.app. I'm just going to click on deploy. All right, our deployment was successful, and yeah, our application is running, and I'm just going to continue to dashboard. But before I go on, I just want to check this deployment and show you something in here. So if we go to the build logs, we can see that it ran our migration due to the command we provided, and also it built all our static assets, right? And then we were able to copy them into the Vercel static folder, and then those were deployed. So with that completed, our application is running right here. We can view it by going to this URL, and we can see welcome to Laravel. Well, similar to that, but note this is running React for the front end and is connecting to our Laravel backend, which also interacts with a database. So with this, the first thing I want to do is to, well, let's register. Let's create an account. So I'm just going to give a name, John Doe. Email would be john@x example.com, password, and confirm the password again. And let's create an account. And here we are inside our dashboard. We just created an account. Again, this is connected to a database. You can see the details for John Doe. There are a couple of other pages here, including the settings page, and we can see John Doe's details. We can of course change password and go back to the dashboard. We can log out and log back in. And just to prove it to you, I went into the PHP that connects to the database just to show you that this database, the migrations were done successfully. And if we check users, we can see that John Doe's record is in here. Okay, so the application is actually connected to a database. With this, you're able to deploy full stack Laravel applications to Vercel. Well, let me know if you found this really helpful, and again, if I do see something more that can further improve this application, I would do well to make another video. But for now, thank you for watching this video. I hope it simplifies your PHP application deployment process and you do lots with it. Also, do make sure you watch the previous video if you're not quite sure as to what some of the configurations that we had to do here means. That would shed more light to it. This video was mostly focused on getting the database set up. On to the next video. Bye.